Është I njohur si emër dhe punon në 7 ditë të javës. Është laboratori Oliv. Ju mirëpret çdo ditë nga ora 7 deri ora 20. Në Oliv kryen të gjitha llojet e analizave të gjakut përmes aparaturave më moderne dhe stafit më profesional.
Jemi në laboratorin më modern në Kosovë. Ky është laboratori Oliv.
Beso në më të mirët. Oliv.
Universum po vjen me shumë programe të reja. Infermieri, fizioterapi, estetik dhe higien dentare, dizajn grafik, dizajn mode, gazetari digitale, siguri kibernetike, shkenca kompjuterike, biznes dhe menaxhment, juridik, shkenca politike, gjuhë angleze, gjuhë gjermane. Apliko online për studime. Universum, universi mundësive.
Miq të gazetës Infokus dhe televizionit Dugazini. Kësaj radhe në konak jemi me pjesën e dytë të intervistës me mikun e madh të shqiptarëve Hyland, I cili flet për rëndësinë e sovranitetit që gëzon Kosova dhe rëndësinë e zhvillimit ekonomik të saj. Hyland në këtë pjesë të intervistës flet edhe për dhomat e specializuara dhe rëndësinë e dekoratës që akorduan nga Presidentja e Kosovës zonja Vjosa Osmani. Tregon se si e kujton Fan Nolin dhe jep vlerësimin e tij për krerët e shtetit të Kosovës. Na ndisni në këtë pjesë të dytë dhe të fundit të intervistës me mikun e madh të shqiptarëve Hyland, I cili ishte zëvendës Drejtori Kombëtar Politik I Fushatës presidenciale të ish presidentit amerikan, miku të madh të shqiptarëve Bill Clinton.
I will get back again to the importance of lobby. Lobby is quite important in the United States.
Yes.
Do you think that we should create groups of lobbying, even here in Kosovo, in order that things move in the right directions? Do we have to create lobby groups?
Well, I have suggested during my visit here that there be a Albanian fund for Kosovo and Albania. It could be an Albanian fund for Kosovo, Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, because there are some Albanians within those areas, but essentially an Albanian fund. And I think that should be spearheaded by the diaspora with the support of Kosovo. And I think that's important because that kind of an approach is a universal one. Under that tent, you can have everyone, rather than this organization which is nationalistic, this organization which is only business, this is only culture. A fund, an Albanian fund, or a Kosovo fund, if you will, can gather money, gather people together, create events, and from that issue grants and oversee things. And indeed, there needs to be a strengthening of the diaspora. Vatra and the overseas international Albanian group that are very important to the matter need all to be strengthened. Whether Kosovo has an official lobbyist in Washington or not, I'm not prepared. I don't know, but I would imagine that they did or somehow should.
We just moved to another important point that Albanians in the United States, rather than just doing business or doing lobby for Kosovo causes, they do even other activities, such as Valtra, that you mentioned, a traditional organization even earlier than Albanian state.
120 years or 110 years? 110, yeah.
And celebrate.
Yeah.
How do you see how important is promoting traditional issues, traditional everything that has to do with the Albanians from Valtra in In cultural aspect, I mean.
I think Vatra is a very important organization. I would imagine, like everything, organizations evolve, and maybe it's time for that organization to remain true to much of what it's about, but it also doesn't hurt them to morph into something like the Albanian Fund for Kosovo and Albania, because then you have a bigger umbrella than the nationalistic aspects of Vatra, which are laudatory and absolutely wonderful. But one needs to take care of the housekeeping here now, and Kosovo has been given a $5 trillion gift, which is called sovereign status. That's a $5 trillion gift. That is an incredible investment.
It has a value?
Value? Staggering.
In money?
Kosovo's sovereign status is priceless. Priceless. Imagine that Walmart, which employs 2.3 or 4 million people, is not sovereign. The international nonprofit organizations, international corporations, none of them are sovereign. None. The Vatican would not speak with the Italian state until my neighbor and mentor, Julia Brambilla, proposed in room of the Ritz, 115, I think, at the Ritz in Paris, that there be a meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy and officials of the Vatican State, which led to the Lateran Treaty. The Vatican wouldn't, because they didn't have sovereign state. They lost the papal states. So the issue here is you have sovereignty. You are a regional, you are Dardania. You are an ancient people. In fact, you are a geographical area and an ancient people that predates Dardania, if you will. The mayor of Pristina just gave me a figurine that is the symbol of the city. So we need to understand that Kosovo is Kosovo, and people want to hear that. And we want a fund, and we want to animate people being part of that. And that is what the Prime Minister is saying now. He might have said other things previously, but that's what he's saying now. And the stronger the message is out there that that's what's going to happen, and if you make enough public relations overtures to the Serbs and say, look, there are all those mines in those hills there, we'll do 50-50 with you. Let's just do business. Why sit them there? Why let hundreds of millions of dollars go wasted? Why let the ski areas go wasted? Let's make a deal. And people can make fun of that attitude, but in the end, when citizens of Serbia and of Kosovo understand that it's in their benefit financially and economically to do business, at least on the business level, things will happen. I know this is a long-winded answer to your story, but it's all part of the ethos, part of the story. Yeah.
Kosovo has founded the specialized rooms, the special court, as we used to call it, and there are leaders of Kosovo war being judged there for allegations for war crimes. How do you see this court? Is it in Kosovo good, or it is damaging the image of Kosovo in the international arena?
I am not sitting here and defending atrocity of any kind. It is deplorable that the British in New York Harbor put hundreds of American soldiers during the Revolution and purposely starved them to death is not a good thing. Tangentially, that British gave us all of our culture of democracy is a wonderful thing. It's a fantastic thing. There is the good and the bad. That in Ukraine now, or in Vietnam, or in Iraq, or along the line of the Somme in World War I, or the concentration camps that spread the DNA of the suffering of the Jewish people across Europe in liquidation camps that the Germans set up. Those are all bad things. At the end of World War II, the United States set up the Coal Authority, which began the European Union, and people who were enemies got together. Unfortunately, during the War of Liberation, the Kosovo Liberation Army with the Atlantic Brigade, which I was very proud of, because I met some of those people in New York, and I was very proud of them. And the Bedici boys, the three of them who died. You see, I know a lot about Kosovo. And that atrocities happened is unfortunately the repeated narrative of war. And if they were willful on all sides, because we know there are Serb atrocities, we know there are Kosovo atrocities, we know that these things happen repeatedly during war. We need to respect the Kosovo Liberation Army for what they achieved, and we need to be understanding that in the heat of battle, horrible things happen, and they must be accounted for. But they cannot judge an entire people any more than the Melee incident can judge the American people, any more than the soldiers, the American revolutionary soldiers starved to death, can judge the British, because the British are a fulcrum of democracy. Every group has good and bad people, and I would hope that this situation could be resolved. I do know that young men in particular, in the heat of battle, emotionally charged, can do things that they probably would never, ever do if they were in a different situation. Everybody is a victim here. By the way, I have nothing to do with it, but even I feel a victim because I was full of pain when I heard and realized that this was happening, But again, we need to move through this. We need to be sensitive to all of it. No justification, but the passion that people are driven to when they are driven from their homes, when hundreds of thousands of people are living on the street, when they are driven across the border to that wonderful town in Albania, Kukës, driven across to Kukës, laying there by the hundreds This creates emotions when they're going up that big mountain near Kukës, but I think it's on the Albanian side. What's the mountain there?
It's Pastoriku.
Yes, and if it weren't for Wesley Clark, the brigade, the Atlantic Brigade, would have been decimated. There are things that are happening here, and I pray for the redemption of those who sadly did atrocities, but we need to understand that is not indicative of an entire narrative.
Mr. Hyland, you mentioned before that as a child, you knew Fan Nol, one of the brightest Albanian national figures that everyone wants to know more about him. Can you share with us details from your meetings? How did you knew him? What was special on him?
Fan Nol was the great friend of Anthony Athenas. And Anthony Athenas had a restaurant in Swampscott, Massachusetts. Everybody knows about Anthony's restaurant, Pier 4 in Boston. But what they don't realize is that his first restaurant, was in Swampscott. And as the crows flies, it was maybe 2 miles from my parents' house. And my father and Anthony Athenas were friends. They even went to Europe together to boost trade between New England and Europe. For instance, they went to the World Fairs together. Mr. Athenas was a very good friend of Fan Nol. My impression is that he was a patron of Fan Nol, supported Fan Nol. And at Anthony's Surfside restaurant, I think it was called, there would be, when we went to dinner there, this older gentleman. And because it was the atmosphere of an Albanian-owned restaurant, you had this family, neighborhood atmosphere. In New York today, if you go to the Albanian-owned restaurants, you're en famille. They know you, they're happy you're coming. And so there was this older man there, And I would from time to time speak to him. And I found him endearing, fascinating, charming. He engaged me, but then again, most, I will say, adults engaged me because I was a bit precocious, and we spoke, and I recall speaking, as I recall, about Anthony Athenas and my parents going to Europe to the World's Fair in Brussels, which might have been 1960, so I might have been 13, and I was just about to leave myself a year later or whatever it was to go by myself to Europe to school. We talked about Europe, we talked about the Balkans, we talked about Albania, which led to me as a 16-year-old eventually taking the train from Istanbul through the Eastern Balkans. The reason that was the way, you couldn't go through Albania. There was no route, and Albania was in a dictatorship. So the only way you could go, and of course Yugoslavia was problematic as well. I mean, relatively speaking, but there was a route, there was a train that you could actually go. So I found fascinating, and I always remembered. And recently, go ahead, I just want to finish this point. Recently, V.B. Barami, who's the editor publisher of Ilaria, showed me a picture of somebody, and I said, oh yeah, I know that guy. Well, he said, you couldn't know that guy. That's Fan Nol. I said, no, but I know that guy because he was always at Anthony Athenas' restaurant. And so I don't know whether it was Anthony Athenas or maybe it was Fan Nol. I don't know whether one of them gave me the book or something relating to Scatterbag, and that's how I ended up knowing about him as a kid and was fascinated by him.
I would like to ask a question. Nowadays, do Albanians have another Fan Nol?
Well, I would
person fascinating, impressive, like Fan Nol.
Well, look. Eventually, the history of Fan Nol, which I began to learn about as I grew older because I was fascinated, it was of an individual who maneuvered, who went to this direction and then moved to that direction, then went to the center, then somehow reinvented himself. The beauty of Fan Nol, and this is my humble opinion, the beauty of Fan Nol was that he had this ability to morph, and one might say, well, that was inconsistent with being true to one's ideals. You have to understand, in a landscape as complicated as this region, where in the town hall of Prizren you still have translators for 3 languages, you have to be able to be flexible. And I believe that in this young democracy, which is Kosovo, there are emerging personalities that could very well have that flexibility, or have at least a 21st century modern version of that flexibility. Does your very capable, articulate, overwhelmingly well-informed president have that in her young future? What will be her limitations after the presidency politically? But she seems to have this focus and an ability to move. Does the young new prime minister have that facility? That is yet to be seen. Will some of the leaders that are now out of the picture for the moment over the last 15 years in any way reemerge, reinvented, looking different? And I think the great asset in life is to understand that maybe I did things differently or wrong or pursued. Let me reimagine who I am for a new time, and maybe my leadership skills are best suited to that period. I think the answer to that question is the judges are out. I don't think it can be answered at this point, other than there have been outstanding people doing outstanding things, but there isn't a 30 or 40 year perspective to look at.
Now there are Albanian mayors back in US, politicians, doctors, very firm and very known businessmen in United States. What does this mean for Albanian community in United States? How important is this for Albanians as a community?
Yeah. Well, it's very important. I believe there's a young man running for Congress, if I'm not mistaken, an Albanian, American, maybe Kosovan, running for Congress. And across the line, the second and third generation, Elio, who owns a Laura restaurant in New York, which, by the way, is a center of Albanian activity, the Albanian ambassador, the Kosovo,
everybody meets there.
Everybody meets at a Laura restaurant, and Elio is the best. His son is employing hundreds of people here in the high-tech sector. And he has a business that somehow relates all round to hospitality services, but are made easier somehow by the use of technology and computers. He is indicative, that son of Elio's, he's indicative of the future. And of course, together with the lawyers, the doctors, the exceedingly successful contractors, the Albanian community in America is perceived as a hardworking, diligent community that's contributing a great deal. And I think once things get even more mature here, the investment and support from that community will be even stronger here. Much like the Irish community in America really did turn around and reach a level of support. John Kennedy founded a fund for Ireland, if you will, that morphed into something else, and now they have events in Washington, in New York City. I believe it was $27 million were raised in one event, and that $27 million went to schools, hospitals, all kinds of things, and that generated activity in Ireland. The same thing will eventually happen with Kosovo.
Mr. Hyland, we are going to another point of this interview. We have to face the reality here in Kosovo. The youth are fleeing the country, even in Kosovo and Albania. What is the danger of this phenomenon for both countries, for Albania and Kosovo?
Well, it's a very difficult issue, and it's also impacting Bulgaria, which has the highest rate of youth leaving the country in all Europe, as a matter of fact. It is not a good thing, and we need to catch up with the infusion of high-tech companies here. It needs to be both an initiative on the manufacturing level, but it needs to be initiative on the high-tech level. You need to be engaged in every level in high technology. I'm not expert at Bitcoin technology in any way. I can't address it, but I'm only using that as indicative of one of dozens of high-tech environments where 100 and 200 and 1,000 Kosovo young people may be involved. If I were in Kosovo right now, I would open up a website and have it as a clearinghouse for luxury products to be sold all over the world. That's what I would do if I could, because I know I run a luxury company and I have a hard time finding the right luxury place to sell my products online. They're not sold online because I can't find the location for it, so I'm giving Kosovo an idea. I mean, fund seed money for someone to go out there, and I tried to do this years ago myself. I would go out and do that in a heartbeat. There needs to be these creative ideas. You need to turn them out, and you need to just do them. The powers that be, whether it's the Prime Minister or whether it is the mayor or the private sector, the director of the business and the University of Business and Technology or Prizren University, they need to just jumpstart these things, not talk about them. It means getting on the cell. Let's get a meeting tomorrow. That's right. And let's see if we can determine whether there are 50 or 30 or 5 people that can be put in a room, get the software done, see if we can attract luxury goods in one site and become the global center. Malta, to a great extent, which I've had a wonderful relationship with since I was a boy and was an honorary consul for many, many years, and I've known all the prime ministers. Malta is incredible. I mean, Malta has done, look to what they've done. Now, they get all kinds of bad publicity about banking this and banking that, but any banking problems they've had are no different than Germany. Germany has had more illegal banking activities than practically any country in the world. And so what I'm saying is it's there, but it needs to be done immediately.
We have come to one great moment. The award that the President of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani, awarded to you and Mr. Jim Xhemës. That award.
Yes, I am.
How you felt?
God, I'm not going to cry again, but I can tell you that I felt very emotional. I received the Ibrahim Rugova Award, and Ibrahim Rugova to me was one of the great personalities who I met in my entire life. I've never met anybody quite like him. How many people found an independent country in Europe, and the fortitude he had. And also Ibrahim Rugova was a professor and an intellectual of aesthetics. And of course I produced textiles that are very beautiful. I designed furniture, I've designed all kinds of things. And so in a way he was like part Thomas Jefferson and part Rousseau and part Sartre and part pragmatic individual who lived both on the intellectual level and on the pragmatic level. And so it was very touching. And then Jim received, which I have the certificate for, and then the president is going to come to New York and give it to him personally, the Order of Freedom, which is the highest award, and Jim will receive that when we go back. And as in my comments that will be given at the University of Business and Technology later today, I have several quotes from Jim in which he's kind enough to really testify to the degree to which he and I really work together. But again, 30 years later, to have the support of the Rugova family, this means a lot to me. I mean, they are the first family of the Republic of Kosovo, and it's because of them that I'm getting this recognition. It's because of their relationship with Jim. The last time Jim was here was at the funeral of President Rugova. He flew in and flew out, and he came here for that president. Jim Xhemës adored President Rugova, respected every single thing that man tried to achieve. And by the way, I would say that Fan Nol and Rugova, I believe, were very different personalities in many ways. But you cannot underestimate the degree to which Professor Rugova had to negotiate the complexities of this environment. And there was one point in which I was trying to effect communications that might lead towards diminishing Serbian angst over Kosovo issues. And I proposed that that Pesh and one or two other monasteries might be given sovereign status, that if someone is telling you, we don't want to give up our territory because we think it's our Jerusalem, when in fact, you know, it might or might not be, but you can take that problem away by saying, okay, your Jerusalem, like,
It's territoriality.
it's sectorial, and indeed, you know, Dr. Rugova, why don't you be the first person to recognize them? And now the Orthodox, now the Albanian people, the people of Kosovo are giving the Orthodox their only sovereign anything that they have, because they're not sovereign in Istanbul. The Vatican is sovereign, but the Eastern Christian Church is not sovereign in any way. And you know, he found that interesting and engaging, and wrote a communication to me on that. And that might or might not sound good to a lot of people, but what it is good and what it does reflect is a person deeply committed to trying to reach a balance before massacre occurs. It's very easy to say, let's level Ukraine, but the real hero is the one who reaches a chord, attains assets that you want, and saves your people's suffering. And that's what he was about. And I think sometimes folks maybe didn't always fully appreciate that, because in the passion of the moment, you know, we're all caught up with this energy. But again, I want it very clear in all of the conversation, the one big long conversation I had with him, and meeting him in the Bronx, speaking with him on the phone a few times, meeting him one or two other times, it was always about Kosovo, 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 freedom, 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 independence, independence, independence. Yet at the same time, this was a man who had an affinity for the Jewish narrative, the Catholic narrative, and showed respect to the physical built world of the Orthodox Church as well. And that's a real hero, that's a real leader.
Do you think that these kind of awards for diaspora, for people who were committed to Kosovo cause, should be shared on ongoing basis in order to prize their contribution to what we have?
Oh, I think awards and recognitions are very, very important and judiciously administered. I find it very interesting in the case of the Irish situation and the campaign, my drawing in the Irish Americans into the campaign for Bill Clinton, creating the Irish for American committees and whatnot. I found it rather amusing to see some of the stories of what people allegedly did or didn't do because they weren't there at all. They were in fact opposing the situation, but of course history gets written by those who write history. The beauty of this story is that Jim and I were there at the center of the history. Jim was making history, I was supporting that making of history. So it's hard to go beyond that. But I believe individuals who achieve things in economics and individuals who achieve things in investment in business here, individuals who in the past have risen to the occasion to serve mightily should be recognized in every way, shape, or form. And I desperately hope, because there is not a single memorial to Jim Xhemës in this entire country, I believe that the wonderful thing about every village in Kosovo is that there's a monument to someone who died, whether it was in Macedonia or Albania or Montenegro, died on the cause of the Albanian people. I think it's a wonderful thing. Every town in New England has a veterans memorial, statues to the people who sacrificed their lives. But Jim created a country. There isn't so much as a plaque, there isn't a street, there isn't a square, and I've been trying desperately to get this done, and we really, if your viewers have any influence, would you please write and the authorities and try to see to make this happen?
We will hope that one day we will have a memorial, we will have something that prizes everything Jim Xhemës did for this country. Now that we are in the very end of this interview, what is your message to all Albanians all over the world?
Well, my message to all Albanians all over the world is to, of course, remain tight, remain strong. Do not allow generational movement over the generations to dissipate your connection to your mother roots. You become American, you become Australian, but at the same time you have this connection to Dardania, and you must always have that connection to the story of Dardania, and you want to do what you can to strengthen the creation of this remarkable nation state, and you want to come back here and spend your time in the mountains of this country, which are spectacular. And even though the cities are bustling cities and might not be considered resort cities, I can tell you a week at the Swiss hotel that we're in right now is as if you're at the Beau Rivage or the Palace in Gstaad. My gosh, look at this wonderful room that we're in. So to come here and vacation is a wonderful step, but also to engage your local parliamentary or legislative individuals, heads of state, to recognize Kosovo, because there are a number of nations that have not recognized Kosovo. One wants to try to animate for the United Nations and all of those sorts of good things.
Mr. Hyland, once again, thank you for everything you did for this country, for Albanians in general, and thank you for accepting us in such a short notice and in such a busy agenda that you have in these days here in Kosovo. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure to have been interviewed by you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be on the record with you.
Thank you. Honor is mine. Të dashur shikues të televizionit Dugazini dhe gazetës Infokus, ky është ekonomiku për sonte. Deri të premten e radhës në orën 22:15, unë ju përshëndes dhe u rikujtoj se emisionet ekonomikut mund t'i ndiqni në televizionin Dugazini dhe të gjitha platformat online të gazetës Infokus. Deri javën e ardhshme, mirëmbëjtje.
Është i njohur si emër dhe punon në 7 ditë të javës. Është laboratori Oliv. Ju mirëpret çdo ditë nga ora 7 deri ora 20. Në Oliv kryen të gjitha llojet e analizave të gjakut përmes aparaturave më moderne dhe stafit më profesional.
Jemi në laboratorin më modern në Kosovë. Ky është laboratori Oliv.
Beso në më të mirët. Oliv.
Universum po vjen me shumë programe të reja. Infermieri, fizioterapi, estetik dhe higjien dentare, dizajn grafik, dizajn mode, gazetari digjitale, siguri kibernetike, shkenca kompjuterike, biznes dhe menaxhment, juridik, shkenca politike, gjuhë angleze, gjuhë gjermane. Apliko online për studime. Universum, universi mundësive.